So, very warm welcome. Thank you for being here. Good evening. I appreciate you all taking the time to be away from family and many other things that you could be doing this evening. My name is Jay Chodagam. If you haven't already seen my emails and so on, I am the co-founder, the host for tonight. I want you to just kind of look around as you're settling down here. I just want you to look around the peers that you have in the room here, and literally the key word is peers. We don't have new graduates from colleges looking for jobs. We don't have marketing people unless they're sponsors, right? These are absolutely people that you want to ideate with, collaborate with, and create cool things and shape the future of AI. That's what we're here to do tonight. So I just want to tell you a quick story about how this club got started. So it was about 2 years ago. Vlad, who's standing right there, Vlad, and myself, we're neighbors, and we were having a cup of tea on the terrace. And he said, Jay, will you help me to create a forum where I can talk to my peers because it's very lonely at the top. So we looked at the other forums in the area. You know, there are conferences, there are a lot of meetups, there's all kinds of different events. But there's nothing where engineering leaders, executives like yourself, can come together without being sold to and ideate to create cool things, right? Problem solve some of your biggest challenges in your day-to-day work. And so I want to mention that there are 3 things that set this event apart from any other Silicon Valley event, and we very consciously have created that. First of all, this is an event created by engineering leaders for engineering leaders. Nobody's getting paid here. We're all volunteers. Speaking of volunteers, can I have all the volunteers please stand up here? So everybody that has a blue badge that you saw probably ushering in, a round of applause for all the volunteers. So we couldn't have done it without their help. And then the other part of it is that we consistently sell out. This is the 6th event. 5 of the 6 events, including tonight, is sold out. Clearly goes to show that we have something that we have valuable to offer. And thank you for your patronage. Raise of hands, how many people have been to an AI Leaders Club before? Look at all these hands around you, folks. And you can talk to them when we have a break, and they'll tell you why they keep coming back here. There is no such event. And so there is going to be 2 parts to this, and you see the agenda floating. I've already emailed all of you the agenda. There's going to be the panel discussion. Then there's going to be the small group discussion where each one of you will be collaborating with people, 7 other people or 8 other people that you have never met before, and we'll be creating solutions for your everyday problems, and I'll walk you through that process. Now, we couldn't have done this without the help of sponsors. Like I said, this is it's a project of love. It's a project of labor of love. And so I just want to recognize the sponsors in the house: Supermicro, Snowflake, Silicon Valley AI Hub, PMG. We have Physenix, and we have Wave Talent, who's flown in all the way from the UK. Can I have all of you just stand up for just a second? Because I'm going to have each of you come and speak. So Physenix, Wave Talent, stand up. Got PMG, Vlad again. Chad is going to be speaking just a minute from the Snowflake. And then we have somebody from Supermicro. Where's Tao? Tao, okay, the whole crew is at the back there. He's going to speak a little bit later too. With that said, so thank you all. Feel settled. Stay for the event. So the second half, like I said, is going to be the game changer for you. You'll never have experienced something like that before. And we have plenty of food. We'll have a lunch break. One of the requests I have for all of you is that please, when we ring the bell, listen to us. I know you'll be having so much fun talking to this cool group of people that you're with, but we need to keep this program moving along so we can send you home, and that way you can go back to work on time tomorrow morning, okay? So we'll try to keep on track. Ivan is my timekeeper tonight. With that said, I'm going to request my first host tonight. So can I have Chad come up? He's from Snowflake, and Silicon Valley AI Hub. Tell us a little bit about the space.
Thank you, Jay. Yes, good seeing you all here tonight. I see a few familiar faces who are already some regulars at the Silicon Valley AI Hub. So the space you're in tonight is sponsored by Snowflake. I work for Snowflake, but Snowflake started the Silicon Valley AI Hub back in September. And so we've hosted over 30 events so far. We've had almost 3,000 people come into our doors since September, since we had our grand opening. Really and truly, what we're trying to do here is create an AI community here in Silicon Valley. So our three personas that we go after are developers, startups, and executives and decision makers in the AI space. So we host events for all three of those personas. We do workshops, we do hackathons, fireside chats, networking events like tonight. So if you're interested in hosting an event here, you can reach out to us, our website, svaihub.com. We have a monthly newsletter that we'd love for you to subscribe to. We do some event, oh, there we go, yeah. You can go to the next slide, actually. We do some event recaps in that newsletter, but we have our monthly newsletter here. We do not spam you. We just give you an idea of what events we've hosted and what events are upcoming. And then we have a LinkedIn group that we post event recaps. We post events that we will host and some thought leadership pieces in there as well. We're about to send out our 2025 recap report later this week, so we'll post it in our LinkedIn group there. But just wanted to say thank you for coming out tonight. Welcome to the space. Welcome to the Silicon Valley AI Hub, and we hope to see you back again. So thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Chad. So with that, we will get into the first part of this evening, which is going to be the panel discussion. I'm going to invite my friend and co-founder of the AI Leaders Club, Vlad Pavlov.
I keep telling Jay that, well, it's not a startup, right? It's not. We did have register a non-profit to run this, but it's not a startup. I don't think we have co-founders here. We are all co-founders of this, right? It's a community. That's the most important part. Can you hear me? Now you can hear me. Okay. So before I invite our speakers to the panel, let's get a quick feel who is in the room. So we know about a third of the room is already here, not for the first time, right? Raise your hand if you are an individual contributor. Oh, not a lot. I thought more. So I guess the rest are people managers. Raise your hand if you manage and say 10 or more people. Okay. Keep your hand up if you're managing 50 or more people. Okay. Keep your hand up if you're managing 100 or more people. Oh, wow. 500? Okay, that's our mark. Co-pilots, vibe coding. Raise your hand if you're personally coding. Cool. That is the Silicon Valley room. Raise your hand if you're using co-pilots, or raise your hand if you're using Copilot personally. Co-pilots. Cool. Raise your hand if your company is using co-pilots on an organizational level, like it's part of your workflow. Cool. Finally, raise your hand if you're using vibe coding on the organizational level. So we have proper room. With that, let me invite our speakers to join me. We are going to have a little bit, guys, come here. Alexander, come here. We are going to have some help from our friends from the tech department, because we have two different audio systems here. One is making it possible for you to hear what we are talking about, and the other is making it possible to record the videos, so those who didn't come will be able to watch later. But there is a little bit of complication here in terms of just technical setup, but I hope it's going to work just fine. And you guys, you just introduced yourselves to us, right? Now we know who are in the audience. Now you need to know who is sitting here on the panel. So just in a moment, we will start the introductions, right? And before we go there, maybe a little bit of test. We are discussing just as an idea. Maybe it's not enough to do the events, maybe the quarterly events. Maybe it makes sense to do something bigger.
one of the ideas we were brainstorming a few days ago was, why don't we do a conference? Like one-day conference, maybe for 500 people, maybe for 1,000 people, somewhere Q2 or Q3, the same target audience, so senior folks in the engineering field. The same format, which is a lot of interactive stuff, not a lot of presentations with slides, etc., but for the full day. Does it make sense? Would you come to this kind of, and of course focused on AI, and of course focused on not kind of marketing side of AI, like agents, etc. I mean, obviously everyone wants to talk about agents, but focusing on more cutting edge stuff, more niche stuff, at different sessions like reproducibility in AI, for example, that kind of stuff, where we have very narrow niches which are still important for some people, and then pick, say, top 5, top 10 topics from those narrow niches. Does it make sense to do this kind of conference? Raise your hand if you would come to this kind of conference. Oh, cool. With that in mind, I believe we already did our technical stuff. So let's do the introductions. Arun, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Can you hear me? Oh. How about now? Oh, that's awesome. OK, thank you. So yeah, hi, everybody. My name is Arun Gupta. I am the VP for go-to-market motion at JetBrains. How many of you use JetBrains today? Quite a bit of you. So yeah, and I joined JetBrains about 2.5 months ago. I lead the entire go-to-market motion for all of JetBrains IDEs. JetBrains is a developer tooling company. Java, Ruby, Python, Go, pick a language. We have an IDE available for that. And it is meant for professional development. And we provide full AI-assisted tooling as part of that. It's an open platform. Developer productivity is our North Star. That's the thing that we fundamentally care about. You can bring in any coding agent, any LLM as part of it. And the idea is we want to give you the choice. We want to give you the flexibility. We don't want to lock you into a platform. That's sort of our narrative. I joined JetBrains about 2.5 months ago. But what my expertise is really building large developer communities. I was part of the original Java team back at Sun Microsystems, back, gosh, 99. And I've built that community from 0 to 12 million developers over the 14 years. Then I kind of moved around a little bit. I was called to come work for somebody, never looked for a job, essentially. But then I was at Red Hat. I built developer communities over there. I was leading their middleware marketing team as well. Went to Couchbase for a short stint of 18 months, led the developer advocacy team over there. Then after that, Amazon, Apple, and then most recently, Intel. So at Amazon, I was crafting sort of what is our developer engagement strategy. I wrote the first open source strategy document for Amazon back in 2017. At Apple, I built the first open source program office at Apple. Again, kind of really chartering those new territories. Excuse me. I've also been on the Cloud Native Computing Foundation governing board. I was on the foundation board for 8 years, and I was the board chair for 4 years over there. That's, again, kind of building a large developer community. How do you grow a large cloud native developer community? There were 30 people on the governing board. How do we rally them together? How do we make sure we are all aligned to that single mission? I was also on the OpenSSF governing board. So if you care about open source security, that's what the OpenSSF governing board is. So I have very deep experience in terms of building those large communities, operating at a governing board level, way up there or way down into the developer weeds. I'm a developer myself. I use all different tools. Of course, JetBrains tools, but you pick like a new coding agent that has come out in the market, I probably tried it. If you talk about Cursor, Replit, Lovable, you pick a tool. I like to try it because I like to feel what the developers are getting a feel for it. That's what allows us to be very authentic at JetBrains, because when we go talk to our customers, how do we make them successful? That's how we make them successful, because we understand what the market pulse is, what the customer needs are, and then we bring that back into our products. So we talk about that on a regular basis. So that's sort of my jive. That's the element that I enjoy, really working with developer communities, growing them, setting up the right mechanisms, setting up the right principles. Something that you probably would not hear, I really, really believe in a lot of mindfulness and kindness. So those are two big traits that I try to bring as my leadership style. So when I'm talking and building those communities, I make sure those continue to be the big traits as part of that. Thank you.
Thank you. We were supposed to have a different speaker from Snowflake, Dvorak, but he got flu. But Snowflake was kind enough to find a replacement. So Anupam, your turn to introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Anupam. I'm an AI research lead at Snowflake. Much of my attention these days is on agents. How do we build them? How do we evaluate them systematically? How do we optimize them? And at Snowflake, we've been doing a lot of work with both data agents and coding agents. I like to say that this is my third act. I was a professor of computer science and ECE at Carnegie Mellon University for 15 years, and then started a company called Truera in the AI evaluation and observability space. We ran it for 5 years, and then we were acquired by Snowflake middle of last year. So those products are now part of the Snowflake AI platform. So it's been great to see the journey from fundamental research to products that are now reaching our 12,000 customers. Coming back to a bit of the theme of today's panel, which is around coding agents and their impact on the software development lifecycle, at Snowflake, we have been very aggressive adopters of this technology. So we are using the leading coding agents like Claude Code and Cursor quite heavily in our engineering org, both for code generation, but also for testing as well as code reviews. So that's number one. Number two is many of you who have been playing with coding agents would have observed that if you have something unique within your code bases, and then the coding agents struggle. Context is king, right? And so recognizing that, one effort that we have kicked off at Snowflake is to build our own coding agent that we call Cortex Code. It's in private preview right now with a few customers. But the big thing there is to take the context that's relevant to Snowflake's product surface and make it available in a structured way to its agent, to this agent, so that it can truly support both external customers as well as internal teams building on Snowflake. And there's a lot of interesting lessons there that would love to share as we go deeper into the panel or after. So those are, I would say, the two main areas of work in the software lifecycle space. And then the third thing, which is my own area of specialization, is around evaluation and optimization of these agents. And we have had a lot of interesting results recently. One kind of area that we approach to evaluation of agents that we recently released, we are calling it, the tagline is, "What is your agent's GPA?" So this is when my professorial instincts get happy. And the key idea there is GPA is goals, plans, and actions. And as all of you know, agents have goals, then the plan, then the act. And the insight was that a lot of agent failures happen when goals, plans, and actions are not aligned. And we capture that in a systematic way in this framework that's part of our production systems, as well as available externally in open source through the TrueLens project, which you can all try out if you like. And then recently we've been doing a lot of work on optimization as well, building on evaluation, which I'll talk about on the panel. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. Victor.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
I guess Vlad and Jay, you guys thought what we're going to say here is so important, you had us mic'd up twice. So please pay attention. This is going to be super important. So we got on two audios, we got the video going, and of course, all of you is going to be laser focused on what we have to say. Thank you for having us. My name is Victor D'Souza. I'm the VP of AI and Data at Applied Materials. Just like Arun asked here, how many over here use applied material products? Oh, that's supposed to be a joke. Oh, there you go. We got applied material. Right? For those of you who don't know about applied materials, we call ourselves the company. We build the equipment that build the chips. So if you're living the AI dream, you're welcome. We help put those chips together for you. Right? We're close to 60, 65 years old. We're based out here in Santa Clara. We are not an end consumer company, so don't feel offended, don't feel hurt if you've not heard about us. But we like to think of ourselves as being on the front end of the AI wave that we see right now. We have roughly around 35,000 employees, $28 billion in revenue, operating out of 26 countries. With that out of the way, we are all living the AI dream, aren't we? So, for those of you who are involved in the traditional machine learning space, have been doing that, doing PhDs, going and working on models, computer visions, transformers, and all of that good stuff, when ChatGPT hit, it completely took over the airwaves. So from the time that ChatGPT hit more than 3 years back now, we took a slightly conservative approach. We were concerned that opening it up to the entire ecosystem would potentially compromise our IP, our PII. So what we did is we took an extremely conservative approach. We wanted to make sure we had the guardrails in place, a little too slow to put those in place, but once we enabled it, we said, here you go. So if you're a software engineer, if you're thinking of Applied as a capital equipment manufacturing company, we have close to 8,000 odd software engineers, right? And that's what the relevance of this discussion is. When we enabled a bunch of tools, some of which I'm not going to name because of where we are right now, the question that we asked after a good year or so was, which part of the dial from a needle has really moved? What are we seeing in terms of the impact? And the question was, it was all over the map. Because one of our key learnings was, unless you can measure it, you do not know what the impact is. So baselining what you've got going in your ecosystem, identifying what does a day in the life of a software engineer, whether it happens to be an algorithm developer, happens to be a Tableau developer, take the entire spectrum. Just throwing a tool, a platform, an agent, or whatever the latest and greatest out there is, our experience said it was very, very subjective. So really focusing on the digital twin, understanding where people spend their time, understanding is there a way to measure some of these aspects was extremely critical for us. Depending on the level, the seniority of some of these folks who are working, depending on the complexity of the activities they were doing, we saw the change, the impact varied as well. Then, of course, Agentic came out and completely retransformed some of those aspects. So we've taken baby steps, we've scaled, we've noticed one of the key learnings for us is the biggest challenge we found in the adoption was the art of unlearning something. So if you're as old as me, you've been in this ecosystem for decades now, one of the biggest challenges we had was there is a tendency, there is a natural instinct for any engineer to gravitate to the traditional way of working. And that will cause some of these capabilities not to be brought to bear from a capability, from an output standpoint. So we will share some of these key learnings throughout the panel, throughout the evening. So looking forward for an engaging discussion.
I felt bad when there was so little hands. I just wanted to share that I grew up in Ukraine. In fact, I grew up in Soviet Union. I studied in high school in Soviet Union, but when I entered university, it was already Ukraine. And there were like 5 or 6 companies that I read about when I was in high school, like in a high-tech world, like the leaders. And Applied Materials actually went public 2 years before I was born. It was one of those companies that I read about living somewhere in that country that doesn't exist anymore. And now here we are speaking about AI agents, and there is a guy from Applied Materials. I think it's so fantastic, it's so awesome. Thank you so much for coming. Alexander, your turn. Tell us about yourself.
Thank you. My name is Alexander Liz. I lead VP AI and ML at ICER and Automation Anywhere. I've been building AI systems for last many years. I've been building systems even before it was called AI. My first rodeo was before 1990. So we built statistical analysis and statistical software that actually made sense of data that we had. Then we did the machine learning, deep learning, and now I'm leading the agents systems that we build for real life applications. We not only build them, we also apply them and we use them in real life. And as the builder of those systems, we see firsthand how they can be used, abused, overused, and used incorrectly. So we spend quite a bit of time in making sure that what we build actually have governance and has guardrails, and we can actually trust to what they do. Last thing that we want is Terminator type scenario when it takes over and actually does what we didn't plan them to do, and they have the potential to do it. We see examples when they take over and try to modify the conditions the way they right now see it fit. Right now it's mostly harmless, but who knows, the agent's evolution happens very rapidly. And as part of the my team, we not only build them, we also use them in our day-to-day life. I see how the people starting to use it, how they develop different skills, how those skills change over time, how the junior developers grow using those tools, and how the senior developers use it. It's a very interesting journey, and having understand the journey is probably very important. And I would want to thank Vlad for actually convincing myself and Jay that this is really the topic that we want to talk about. And based on the number of people in this room and raised hands, I really agree that this is something that every one of us wants to know and wants to talk about.
Fantastic, thank you. I guess it's my turn to introduce myself. Jay already briefly mentioned. My name is Vlad. I work for a company which is a software company that pretends to be a marketing agency. As a marketing agency, we are, according to Forrester, we are one of top 3 independent agencies in the United States, one of top 5 worldwide. We have customers like Nike, McDonald's, even Apple is our customer. Under the hood, we are actually a technology company that allows us to be way better than all our competitors, to offer one of the best in the industry returns on advertisement spend, how much money is generated by every single dollar invested into marketing. And we are one of the best because we created a proprietary suite of tools that automate most of the marketing workflows. The company created this suite of tools, it's called Ali, about 8 years ago. We keep evolving it. Just to give you a sense, last year, our technology enabled ad delivery to over 1 billion consumers worldwide, basically 20% of adults on the planet. This year, probably we are going to be like 50-70% more. A few years ago, a couple of years ago, we figured that AI was basically, adapting AI was not a question for us. It's either we adapt AI or we are going to disappear. So we decided to become AI first organization, and I'm basically leading this transformation in leading our engineering team to get from traditional engineering organization to what we call AI first organization, which means both integrating AI functionality into our tools, something that was not, some use cases that were not possible even to imagine before AI was introduced. But it's also not about creating AI functionality for the users, it's also about using AI for our engineers to become faster and more productive, more efficient. Before joining PMG, I spent over 25 years on leadership positions in different companies, startups, mid-sized companies, large corporations. When it comes to startups, I co-founded 3 of them, had 1 exit. When it comes to mid-sized companies, I was with a few of them. In one of those companies, for example, I was VP engineering, leading a team that created product which processed traffic from about 600 million mobile devices worldwide, basically traffic from 10% mobile devices at that point of time on the planet. And I was also with large folks, with Intel, and after that Microsoft had hunted me, so all the time on leadership positions. All this time I was also very active in kind of non-corporate world, was organizing different events, conferences, IEEE, ACM, etc., etc., etc. And here we are doing right now this club. Thank you so much for coming here. And I guess it's time for now for us to go to the questions. We drafted a list of questions I shared with all the speakers, but these are just kind of starting point. We don't have to stick exactly to this list of questions. Let's make it more improvisational. And also, I want to show in 2 minutes per answer. It doesn't mean that each of the speakers who answers has to spend exactly 2 minutes, right? You can spend less time if you want to. You are not required to spend exactly 2 minutes. With that in mind, we already had a lot of people, we already seen it. A lot of people raised their hands when they asked how many of you are using AI in your companies. But this is Silicon Valley, right? This is very different world from what is happening outside. But what do we see around? Are companies using agents, software development agents at scale? Are they using vibe coding? And who is in a better position to answer this question if not the company that actually conducts, I believe, annual survey, right? So what does JetBrains see on the market?
Yeah, well, I'm a runner. When I run with a vibe. But when I code, I like precision. I don't like the vibe over there. So I think that's an important differentiation. So I don't like the term vibe coding by itself. It's more about AI-assisted coding is what I'm looking for. So that is really helping me be more productive. So for JetBrains, we have done this developer ecosystem report over the last 10 years now. And in that report, we have seen trends constantly from our customers. What do they care about? What values to them? So it's been very clear that in the IDE, the code is no longer primarily written by humans. A lot of the code is written by the AI assistants. Pick a model of your choice, pick a coding agent of your choice. And in that sense, JetBrains is really an open platform. And we really believe in standards like ACP, Agent Client Protocol, which provides a standard way by which you can connect a coding agent with an IDE. And we want to give that flexibility, that entire choice to the customer so that they can improvise on what matters to them. Now, coding is probably 10 to 20% of the time that is part of the SDLC. A large part of the time is really going towards talking to the customers, getting the requirements done, putting them into Notion, putting them into Asana, project management, then going the actual writing the spec, testing, verifying, all of that. So while AI-assisted coding helps you kind of increase the productivity in the code generation part of it, but for that code generation, do you need AI babysitters who are then going to manage the code generated by the LLM because of the non-deterministic nature of the LLM? So what we are seeing is heavily in the enterprise where the vibe coding, quote unquote, is being used is to really understand the code base better. Hey, I want to make a change, but I have no business context, no developers who wrote the code to understand that better, and maybe more effectively used for greenfield projects where we can say, aha, I want to start something new, I want to prototype it, and I want to get it to a place where I can give it to somebody who can take it into production. So those are the two places where we have seen biggest impact.
Fantastic, thank you. And the most enterprise person in our panel today, Victor, what's your opinion?
Oh, no pressure. So vibe coding is as good as it is the natural language conversation. Start prompting, start generating code. But for those of you, remember that this is not the first option you've got when it comes to self-service. So while it's great for democratization of development activities, but think about, where have you heard this before? For those of you who've had the privilege of building dashboards, power applications, all kind of self-service solutions, there are organizations that are out there which have more dashboards and applications than employees. Because you keep creating them, you keep churning them out by the tons, right? So it's extremely important that we bear that in mind. We factor that in and say, can I use a capability of this nature for me to rapidly prototype, for me to vet out an idea, for me to think through and see what I'm conceptualizing, if I have to bring it to fruition, does it make sense? Does it have the minimum viable product attributes to it that I can then think about, then working with the grown-ups in the room and say, help me scale this for the rest of the enterprise. Because if we do not have those kind of balancing act between the flexibility to go do that and at the same time bear in mind what it takes to go scale this, the amount of technical debt, the amount of risk from a security, from a vulnerability standpoint. Arun, you mentioned the billions of lines of code that are getting generated. How easy or how difficult is it for there to be some kind of ingestion in there which completely exposes your ecosystem to something you don't want it to be? And then, of course, from a cost overrun standpoint, mind you, when you're doing that, the AI companies are super happy, the GPU companies are super happy, the factories keep running, but so does the meter as far as the cost is concerned. So those three key attributes is something from a learning standpoint I think we should bear in mind.
Fantastic, thank you. And you mentioned maintainability, and I believe it's one of the pushback points when you talk to professional engineers about vibe coding. But is it safe? Is it secure? Is it easy to maintain? And I don't know about you guys, but I hear this pushback from my engineers a lot about vibe coding. And I'm kind of confused here because, look, self-driving cars, they're already safer than human drivers, right? So when it comes to this kind of mission-critical AI, it's already better than humans. I would assume that vibe coding tools should also be coding better than humans. What would it take to get there? Is it possible to get there? Alexander, what do you think?
Well, I think that eventually we'll probably get there. And what the vibe coding is actually taking the idea and understanding what it is and creating some implementation that will drive it. In vibe coding or any software-assisted coding, what the machine does is mean reverting. It actually takes and creates something that average developer would create on average scenario. And that actually probably fairly reliable way to create software. Are we already here? Probably not. And it's more not generating the code, but understanding the intent when you do the vibe coding. Because you tell the machine, I want to do this, and it understands that it wants to do something different. And the problem that we cannot understand it unless we have a really good verification of what's been developed, as well as ways to set up the guardrails and validation rules for what has been developed. And assuming that the person who does the vibe coding does not really understand how to validate the software, we need not only the vibe coders, but also vibe QA, vibe analysts, vibe testers.
Do they have to be humans or they have to be like agents?
Well, probably agents will do most of the time, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
So self-driving cars also not there yet. They just starting to appear and probably will have to go through some evolution. And in the past we said, can see compiler create a code which I can write in assembler language. Well, initial ideas they can't. But we see them right now, nobody does assembler coding, right?
Okay, cool, thank you. Anupam, what do you think about it?
I think that it's useful to think in kind of two areas. One is similar to what you were mentioning, that there's just the introduction of vibe coding has injected tremendous velocity into the product development lifecycle. So I'm not talking about production code now, just the conception of the product, creating a prototype, validating it with customers, or whatever, however you want to validate it. Usually we go to market with it. That there is just tremendous velocity augmentation.
So it's more for product managers, not for engineers.
I think these boundaries are blurring, right? Like many engineers become product managers. I don't know, this room, maybe you only picked engineers, but there's lots of product managers who started out.
Product managers also be like.
How many product managers who are also engineering degrees? There you go, right? Like I think that boundary is blurring dramatically, also design. So that would be my number one takeaway, which is product development lifecycle is conception stage is hugely accelerated by this approach, number one. Number two, going from that generation, that initial prototype, to evaluating it and then getting it to the high enough quality that you can ship it to production, there is also a good amount of progress there. I think you will dock me for time in a few seconds, but I'll just highlight two things. We can come back to it later. One is very meaningful evaluation harnesses for coding agents in the context of your organization. That requires work, and there's been progress on it, and I can speak to it later. The other piece is the context of the organization itself. Our engineers, as you go higher up, as you go higher up in the organization, they carry a lot of context in their head, which shows up in engineering design docs or in over-the-shoulder support for engineering teams as they build production-grade code. So those are, I would say, the two big things: better evaluation harnesses and better ways of capturing context. On both of them, there are actually been dramatic progress, which we can get into later.
And I'm glad you mentioned that the cycle accelerates and borders are blurring between the roles, and probably there are new roles now. And at least in our company, we are thinking, okay, what is the org chart for this brand new post-software in engineering world? Raise your hands if in your companies you're thinking how you should change your org chart in the engineering organization to better incorporate the agents and agentic technologies. Some companies. Keep your hand or raise your hand if you already made those changes. Oh, a few folks. I'm glad that on our panel we have someone who also moving in this direction. So Victor, why don't you share experience of applied materials here?
Yeah. So as we started the journey, and we started with AI-assisted auto code completion and all of that good stuff, right? Like I said, as we started measuring, because we felt the impact of some of these solutions back in the day, at least a year or two back, wasn't as wide when the task itself wasn't very monotonous. So we focused on the center portion of the software development lifecycle, which is the code generation, the documentation, and the unit testing portion of it. Once we had that captured, we had that measured, what we then is shifted left and said, is there an AI agent that can help me with accelerating the requirement gathering portion of it? Because what we felt was any gains, if at all, that we encountered was being negated by the time that was being spent in documenting, gathering all the requirements, the design portion of it. Once you'd hit that, it was like a whack-a-mole syndrome. The next thing you know, the mole popped up and you had challenges around integrating it. So once the entire SDLC was captured, was covered with different levels of efficiency that we were seeing, we then switched to the agentic mode. And what we noticed was, for those of you, has anybody seen your 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds playing soccer in a field? Where, when the ball is, everybody, all 11 people run to the ball, and, you got the whole defense line is lost. What we noticed was there was so much of energy and enthusiasm where a lot of this value that was getting generated wasn't getting realized because you couldn't scale it with that kind of an approach. So organizationally, what we decided is we're going to have a group of folks who are going to champion and say, I'm going to evaluate the latest and greatest which is out there. I'm going to look at it purely from a context of what happens within the enterprise. We're going to go define the playbook that's going to meet our SDLC process, because each organization is going to have a flavor of that. If you're going to take something and you're going to plug it in and say, geez, why isn't the needle moving in the right direction? You know why? Because you haven't tailored, you haven't written the playbook, you haven't catered it to meet your organizational need. How are you measuring that's going to be super critical as well. So what we have is we've got a group of folks who play the roles of champions. They're the one who create the value. We've got a group of folks, we've got a distinct line which from a realization standpoint focus on executing the playbook that has been created, that has been customized, that can be measured specific to the multiple tools that we've rolled out.
Mm-hmm. I assume that JetBrains, when you guys are thinking about future versions of your products, you're thinking about the future SDLC, the future roles that will be in the engineering team. So what's that thinking? How do you see that future?
So not only we see that evolving within our own company as a software company, but we're also looking at how we do that for our customers, so that when customers are using our product, we make them effective users of it. So SDLC has fundamentally shifted, fundamentally getting transformed, and it's going to continue to change. The way we think about this is more like intent-driven, accelerated by an agent, but still human-governed. That human in the loop is super critical because end of the day, you can't say, oh, AI generated that code. No, you still own it. So I think in that sense, that is a fundamental shift that we are seeing. Then the second part that we're seeing is, if you guys are familiar with a two-pizza team, right? 8 to 10 people, one microservice, that fundamental is changing. It's becoming a one pizza team now. Because now I have one person who's very expert orchestrator of one of the coding agents or the LLMs. One is a subject matter expert, and the other person is sort of acting as a customer. So smaller teams being able to deliver. The circuits are getting short-circuited. You're getting delivery a lot faster. And if you look at the DORA report that came out from 2025, it calls out that actually. It says if your teams are not efficient, AI is going to expose those deficiencies. But if your teams are done structurally well, it's only going to enhance that ability. So those are the few things that you got to think in terms of that language, that how is the SDLC evolving? What is a human in the loop process? Because end of the day, trust, but verify. That's a super important component of the SDLC. The other part that I want to say here also is, think in terms of SDLC, because SDLC is not just software, right? Asana, your Notion, your Figma, because that is a big part of your SDLC. If coding is the one that is getting accelerated, what are your agents going to do? And I think you started getting into that direction. I'm not just looking at coding agents. I'm looking at testing agents, monitoring agents. I want this to be done in an autonomous way. So that's the language that we are thinking within JetBrains and what we are seeing within our customers as well.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm glad you mentioned DORA report, because one of the authors of DORA report, Jim Kim, he actually recently published a book about vibe coding, and I believe it's the only book which is talking about vibe coding in the professional engineering settings, not just for someone who just wants to try to create an app. Unfortunately, he doesn't live in Silicon Valley. I tried to get him to speak at this panel, but he lives in Washington State. But he is very, very interested to speak at our conference. So we haven't decided to do the conference yet, but we already have a line-up of speakers. With that in mind, my next question is, I'm not entirely sure you're going to like it, but maybe you will. What about vendor lock-in? How the companies should think now about the vendors, the platforms, the selection when it comes to the agents? And who wants to talk it? Maybe Alexander. If you want to.
It's okay. It is a lot of vendors that claim they do have an agentic platform or agents or whatever employed. And when we looked extensively at those vendors, because we developed those agents ourselves, and we also use them in many of our applications. And many of those are vibe coded and does not work. So, but we really understanding what they do, how to test them, and verify that they do what they say they do, it is a challenge. And I think this challenge will be with us for a few years, probably, maybe more. And I definitely see some companies, some ideas, and you want to start a startup, is how to actually build the tools to validate an arbitrary agent. And that is not as easy as you think.
We have someone on our panel who did just that before they sold this company to Snowflake.
After.
Okay, after.
We were doing some before.
Okay, that was... Okay, anyway, sorry for interruption. Go ahead.
That means that there is a room, and it is really important to be able to tell independently what that agent does before you make a decision to buy. Like if you buy any tool, you want to know what the tool does, how it's reliable, what performance you can expect from it. So I think until we have this infrastructure in place, there's probably not going to be any serious companies like Applied Materials or Snowflake buying platforms built on agents. That's, I think, but you guys might correct me.
If I could add a little bit, I think what you're preaching to I love this argument. We do need very good evaluation and verification. But the question I was reading from you was about interoperability, because the part of the response to vendor lock-in is if the systems are defined in a way that interoperability is easy, then you have a way to swap out, right? And on interoperability of agents, there has been a lot of work. MCP is a standard that many of you will be familiar with, that initially Anthropic was pushing. Now it's part of the Linux Foundation.
Agentic AI Foundation.
Agentic AI Foundation, which just came out with Anthropic. Snowflake is also part of it. There are several other companies. And the key idea there is by having a uniform way of describing tools, it's easy for, as you're building your own agents, different companies can make their tools available through MCP servers.
Do they want to do that?
Yes, because what it enables is it just opens up the market, right? So there is a strong argument for why adopting an open standard is useful. I would say there's more work needed there. Not just tools, you want agents to be able to interact with other agents. All those extensions are coming in MCP. So that's an example of, and it was pushed by enterprises because they, in the old cloud war days with vendor lock-in on individual clouds, till Snowflake came along, of course, but data format lock-in was also there. Now we have Iceberg and standards like that. And having MCP come up so early in the evolution of agent technology, I think is very, very remarkable.
But I can think of at least one major hyperscaler, a company that offers cloud platform that have amazing vibe coding tool that allows you to create beautiful, fantastic UX that easily deploys and works on top of their platform, right? So for them, AI is an enabler to basically create more workloads for their backend, for their platform. So for them, I would assume the logic is opposite. It's my hypothesis.
So if I were to add, we are a tooling vendor company. We love people to use our tools, but the responsibility is upon us to prove it to our customers on a daily basis that we are the right platform for them. And I think open standards, as you talked about, is the only way we can do that. So LSP, the language server protocol, is what enabled how you incorporate standard language support in IDE. That's what we're implementing. ACP is a new standard that I just talked about, agent client protocol. So yes, we have Junie as our coding agent, but that's not the only coding agent we want to offer to our customers. You bring a coding agent. So Mistral, for example, just launched their Vibe CLI. And literally 30 minutes after the launch, I could integrate Mistral Vibe CLI, talking to DevStral, their agent running in the cloud, because that is my use case. So that open standards is all the more important right now.
But there are more like a dozen of them now, right? How do you, like you, the vendor, JetBrains, you can't support all of them. How do you decide which one to focus on?
We don't have to, right? That's the beauty of open standards, because it gives you flexibility. All we do is we work on the ACP, which is what does on-the-wire protocol look like, what transports we provide support with. And this is not a JetBrains protocol. We have worked with Z Industries on that. And it's a standard protocol. We have all the agents that are ACP compliant. So imagine if it's a closed standard, then each IDE will have to build a bespoke implementation and integration with that coding agent. It is an M multiplied by N problem, which is basically what MCP was solving. But with this open standard, it's a M plus N. Any IDE that is ACP compliant, any agent that is ACP compliant, they can work with each other. So there are multiple IDEs today that are doing that, ditto with the coding agent. So at the end, the customer has a choice, as an ability, they can pick the right IDE for them. So in that sense, in that open market, JetBrains has to prove their worth. And similarly, in the coding agent, we have to prove our worth that we are the right coding agent.
Alexander mentioned serious companies, and I think meant Applied Materials. So, okay, very short.
Yeah, actually one of the Fortune 100 companies came to us and asked to create a system that will help us to orchestrate all kind of vendor agents they have. And they have like dozens different vendors. It's a very large company. I don't want to name names, but very large. Everyone knows it. Probably everyone uses it. But they have so many agents that they haven't been able to actually make them work together and make sure that they work safely in the protocols they want. So it came to us to create a system that will orchestrate all those agents together.
So are you going to make the system available for the market to buy and use?
No, we will make for them to actually use.
Oh, okay.
So our system is quite extensible. So we use our basic system with some extensions that allows us to orchestrate all those hundreds.
But I mean that if someone has the same problem in the audience, they can come to you and you can also do it for them, right?
Oh, technically, yes.
Okay, fantastic. Anyway, you mentioned Victor. I feel that I need to give Victor.
Yeah. So back in the day, the first few iterations of options that we evaluated, IDE was almost a religion for the developers. I remember, thankfully I don't have any hair left on my head, pulling my hair out. Like, why would you not leverage this capability? We're going like, what do you mean? I got to copy paste from this particular, whatever that was, GitHub Copilot or Windsurf. No, it's too difficult for me. And it almost was a religion. Why? Because having software engineers not thinking from an AI first approach, right? Like Elon says, getting technology to change is easy. Getting a human mind to change, you got to do a brain surgery, right? Which one is more difficult? So that was the biggest, Mount Everest that we were facing. But look, some of these newer capabilities speak for themselves. All of a sudden, people are not really, IDE is not a religion anymore. They suddenly find it easy, the CLI, I can ask all kinds of questions, right? So to that extent, I think some of the newer capabilities that are rolling out are doing the difficult work of changing a human thought process, forget what you've done in the past and reconsider the way you're doing it. From an architecture standpoint, as modular as we could make it, there are some aspects of the lock-in that you can't avoid, right? But from a modular architecture perspective, making sure the best of breed LLMs are available to work with some of these plugins, I think in our books, that's not a showstopper anymore.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So if you're changing our org chart, if you're changing our SDLC, probably we're going to have different approach to hiring as well, right? So Anupam, I guess maybe you can share some view on whom we hire more, whom we hire less. Does it change our approach to hiring at all?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So one thing that is happening in the industry is that the number of junior people who are being hired has gone down, right? So I have been involved a little bit with the recruiting this year, and I've gone to various campuses, like 300 people show up and these are top schools, because many of the big tech companies have pulled back on hiring fresh grads. At Snowflake, we have taken the opposite approach. We are leaning in on hiring fresh grads. That is not to say we don't need senior people. I think our engineering org has a lot of senior people. And our observation is that the fresh grads coming out of many of these good schools are very natively using these tools already, and they are bringing in fresh ideas, fresh perspectives. And that, combined with the experience and mentorship of the more senior engineering folks in the organization, is the right combination to move fast and create new things. So it's a bit of a contrarian position, perhaps, relative to the rest of the industry, but that's the approach we have taken.
I don't think it's contrarian. I mean, in our company, we took exactly the same approach. We had these two schools of thought, and frankly, I belong to the first one, which is now we need just senior folks, and juniors, basically now it's AI instead of juniors. And then the second school of thought was, well, but the juniors, they are they're AI native. For them, it's more easy to use those tools. And this point of time, the second school of thought is winning in our company. And apparently, I see the results. I see it working. With that in mind, maybe Snowflake and PMG are not alone. Let's ask the audience. Guys, who is thinking that now we need the ratio between seniors and juniors is shifting towards more seniors, less juniors in this AI world? Who believes it's about seniors? Okay, who believes it's about juniors? More juniors. And who believes it doesn't change at all? Okay.
So this week, interestingly, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal. So of all the CEOs who are interviewed, there's the CEOs of companies who have a minimum revenue of $1 billion. 67% said they're going to hire entry-level workers. 67%. Now, you would ask yourself why that is the case, right? You mentioned this. The creative ways in which some of these newer folks who are entering the workforce, the way they're going about it, because they don't have any inhibitions in their mind that this is the exact way I'm supposed to do it. Because when you do that, because you think you know better than the AI, you've done it for decades, this is the best way of doing it. So I'm going to continue down the path and try and see if the AI can fit into my way of working. We are leaving a lot on the table. Earlier on, I mentioned about actually unlearning the traditional way of working and, going about thinking a new way, thinking about the creative way, thinking about the context, giving it more information that you get, the output which is more pertinent to you. That we saw is extremely critical. So the creativity, and gone are the days when there was this, I'm going to write code in a boilerplate format, then I'm going to go about iterating it, testing it, learning it doesn't work. That's my way of any traditional way of learning a language anymore. What we've seen is the entry barrier, whether it happens to be a programming language, whether it happens to be a business domain, has dropped significantly with some of these capabilities that are coming into the ecosystem. So for, if companies have taken, I'm hoping more companies take that approach. That means more for us, because what we are seeing is our experience is exactly the opposite. Unfortunately, in this case, the Wall Street Journal article also talks about significant high amount of CEOs who are saying they're going to go for entry-level workers.
Maybe if I can add an additional piece of information here, which I think many of you may have seen, which is, so I teach once a year at Stanford. I just finished my course. We see this trend at Stanford, but I was also on a panel at Berkeley, the same trend, which is, if you look at introductory programming language courses right now in colleges, students don't show up in office hours. They all score close to perfect on homeworks, and then they bomb the in-class exams. And I think that's a real concern. Yes, they're very comfortable using coding agents, but unless we shift how we teach them coding, they may be coming out with not great fundamentals, right? So like in the panel at Berkeley, one of the suggestions from the faculty there was maybe they're historically, like you're saying, we were taught the syntax of the programming language because the writing of that first version of the code was the harder activity. Now, the first version is created by these agents quite quickly, but reviewing that code, understanding whether it actually achieved the task that you assigned it, and then going through that loop of evaluation and iteration to improve it, that perhaps needs to become a much more like a first principles part of the education. But we haven't quite figured out how education needs to change to enable that. And that's why I was saying that the answer isn't just fill up your team with junior people, because many of the junior people come in with these blind spots now. They will ship code rapidly, but they also have to learn a little bit more about evaluation, about the architectural principles. Those are things that still need to be figured out.
I mean, if I add a similar perspective, this is not the first time we're seeing the disruption, right? From punch cards to COBOL, from COBOL to C++, from C++ to cloud, to microservices. you pick a technology, this is probably the most disruptive in terms of what is happening in the coding. So the hiring practices have to change. I think you were talking about it. I heard on a Hartford podcast, they were talking about how the model is shifting from triangle, that a lot more developers at the bottom layer and then it goes up, is shifting to diamond. Well, a lot more middle and senior level people, but very low junior level people. Well, that's the pipeline problem. If there are not enough junior level people, how are you going to make it to the middle level people? How are you going to do the mentoring? How are you going to do the guidance? And what I really like is the way we think about this is we want to engage at the lowermost level, bring them on boards. I think for a year or two, maybe it's going to be a bit disruptive. I feel for the students who are just graduating out of college right now, because the academic courses have not adapted to use the coding agent. And as you're saying, that's a challenge in terms of adapting the codes. But I'm hoping that over the next course of year or two, the academia is going to catch up and going to start changing their practices. Werner Vogels gave a keynote, his last keynote at reInvent a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about Renaissance developer. And that's the element that you should think about. And in terms of the Renaissance developer, he talks about a developer who can communicate with precision, because intent and spec is going to be how you're going to talk. A developer who can own the system. You build it, you run it. If it breaks down, don't say AI going to go fix it. You own it, basically. So those are the qualities he is talking about. A Renaissance developer is the one who's a system thinker, as opposed to I'm just going to create my module and I'm done with it. No, it works in a system. So those fundamentals, independent of the technology shifts that we have seen, are not going to change. And with AI, actually, it's only going to accelerate more. So you really need to think in terms of that. What is your onboarding plan? When you bring these developers on, your hiring not only needs to change, but your onboarding needs to change dramatically. So how do you give them that context, that business context on all of those elements?
Fantastic. We have time for one short last question. I want to give this mic to someone from the audience to ask this question.
So I wanted to ask Anupam the question that you mentioned about the fundamentals of engineering. So I'm not an engineer myself, but I work with a lot of businesses that are hiring top engineers. A lot of businesses want these engineers that are vibe coding, speeding up the development process, but then requiring these hard fundamentals. So how does that then affect you hiring? If you're bringing in junior people that are excellent vibe coders, but they're not learning the fundamentals, how do you balance that during hiring and scaling up the teams? And I guess that question can go across all of you as leaders, but I think there needs to not only be process put in place within the schools, but also within hiring, because I don't think you can have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, for sure. That's a very good point. Usually in engineering interviews, it's not just, you don't just ask them to write code. You also have a design interview where they're designing a complex system. As I said, we have to also shift a bit more, even in the coding interviews, shifting more towards evaluation and correctness of the code, becoming an important part of rather than like the first cut, here is a code that, and I think very soon, we should expect that companies will allow the use of coding agents in the interview process. I think Meta may have already started. I think we should absolutely do that, keeping that out of, that's like saying you can't use the tool that you will be using on a daily basis in your job. Yeah, exactly. It makes no sense. So I don't have the full answer for you, but I expect shifts in process towards evaluation of design thinking, architectural thinking, and at the coding level, more on evaluation, iteration to get to a correct output, testing, and so on.
Yeah, anyone has a question that assumes very short answer? Yes, please.
Because many of you came from the enterprise backgrounds, I hear the important topics of, say, manageability, interoperability, etc. But is it possible that somebody is going to take the Apple approach versus the Windows approach and say, we're going to actually fundamentally change the experience of how developers build, and they don't have to worry about all of those complexities, and truly that will be the next, Apple of IDEs or coding? Do you think about that, or do you think that's not feasible?
Thank you for the question.
I think it's premature to kind of start creating that stack. It's too early in the cycle, in my opinion. I think that we need to shake the can a little bit more in terms of what that's going to look like, because we haven't even seen what would software development look like in 5 years. It's anybody's guess at this point of time, right? So I think it's still at least a few months out. Maybe we'll see something early next year, mid next year, but what that stack going to look like? Amazon, for example, shared their coding agents. But when you actually try to operationalize those coding agents, it is a nightmare. So yes, efforts are happening in that direction, and I'm sure all these big hyperscalers, big companies would like to provide it, but I believe open is going to be the key, because you don't want to get into the system where you are logged in and then you are stuck by that and then you are swearing on that system every day. So that open interoperability, choice, flexibility is going to be really important over there.
It's a matter of when, not if.
Exactly.
Yeah. Fantastic. I would like to say thank you to our fantastic speakers. I believe it was one of the best panels I moderated, and they moderated quite a lot of panels in my life. Thank you so much. I would like to say thank you to you, the audience, for coming. And this is just the beginning of our event. We have dinner, and then we have the game, and then we have the networking. So please enjoy the evening. But for now, let's say thank you to our panelists.